to be the king of hell. That wasn't a role that Lucifer took on eagerly after he found himself casted out of heaven alongside his first wife. However, if it weren't for Lilith's ambition and staunch determination to make the most out of their newfound reality, he had to admit he never really would have the privilege to fulfill each and every one of his desires in the first place. Falling in love with a sinner wasn't something that Lucifer was fond of, which is why Charlie had set him up on this blind date, and he was anxiously awaiting them. Lucifer entered the lounge, the room filled with a low, sultry music, and a candle lit, casting a warm, inviting glow. He sat at a table, his fingers drumming impatiently against the tablecloth. Just then, he spotted someone. A figure stepped through the door, the soft light of the room illuminating their features. Her eyes were bright and curious as they scanned the room until they landed on Lucifer, a small smile spreading across their lips. "Ah, there you are," he said, standing as she approached. She took a seat across from him, her hands resting gently on the edge of the table. There was a subtle air of confidence about her, yet a hint of nervousness too. "Hello," she said. Her voice was warm and inviting. You must be Lucifer." Lucifer chuckled, his lips curling into a smirk. "The one and only," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "And you are?" The corner of her mouth twitched with a hint of a smile. She couldn't help but feel a little flustered underneath his gaze. "I'm YN," she said, trying to hide her nerves. "Nice to meet you, Lucifer." Lucifer gave a faint smile, studying her closely. He was intrigued by her, he had to admit. She was unlike anyone he'd ever encountered before. There was a certain charm to her, a hint of mystery. "YN," he repeated, testing his name on her tongue. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. His gaze flickered over to her face, taking in all her features. "So, tell me, YN," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "What brings you here tonight? Are you meeting someone special?" He raised an eyebrow, a hint of a teasing smile playing against the corner of his lips. He knew who had arranged this date, but he wanted to keep her on her toes. Wayne's cheeks flustered ever so slightly as she met his gaze. She had never met someone so important before. I mean, this was the king of hell. "Actually," she began. Her voice was a little softer than usual. "I was set up on a blind date, if you can believe it." Lucifer feigned surprise, pretending to appear shocked. Of course he already knew this, but he found it amusing to play this game. "A blind date? How intriguing," he said, leaning back in his chair, his arms just crossed behind his head. "And who might this lucky person who gets to have the pleasure of your company be tonight?" Wyan shifted a little bit, her eyes flickering away from his intense gaze for a brief moment. She was a little flustered, but she tried to keep her composure. "I'm not sure. I didn't get many details about who I'd be meeting, but I have to say, I wasn't quite expecting someone like you," she teased. Lucifer chuckled, his smirk widening. He loved the way she squirmed under his gaze. It made the whole evening so much more entertaining. "Someone like me, huh?" he said, leaning forward once more. "And just what kind of person were you expecting, Wyan?" Lucifer, who was trying his best to maintain his confidence, but he felt that pang of nervousness in his chest. Despite his attempt to remain unaffected, Wyan's presence was having an unexpected effect on him. He hadn't anticipated the way his heart would thump in his chest or the slight shiver that ran through him whenever their eyes met. He quickly composed himself, hiding his uncharacteristic vulnerability behind a cocky smile. But then the subtle hint of unease in his eyes betrayed him. Wyan noticed the subtle change in Lucifer's demeanor. His usually confident and carefree attitude seemed to be faltering for a moment. like a crack in his suave exterior. She couldn't help find it a little endearing. "Are you nervous, Lucifer?" she asked. Her voice was soft and laced with a hint of amusement. His eyes widened in surprise for a split second before he quickly regained his composure. Clearing his throat, he leaned back, the smirk returning to his face. "Me? Nervous?" he said with a voice dripping with mock disbelief. "Hardly. I'm the king of hell after all. I don't get nervous." He tried to play it off. Wyan raised an eyebrow at his attempt to brush it off. She could tell that he was trying to hide all of his nerves, so she wasn't very convinced. "Sure. The king of hell doesn't get nervous," she teased. "But you're not just the king of hell, are you? You're also a man." "Just a man. A man on a blind date." Lucifer chuckled at her comment, realizing that she had seen through his facade. He had to admit, he liked her perceptiveness. It was quite refreshing. "Yeah, sharp, why don't you?" he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I suppose you have a point. I may be the king of hell, but at the end of the day, I am but a man." Lucifer leaned forward, his gaze slowly roaming her face, lingering on it a little bit longer than necessary. He wouldn't, well, maybe couldn't help himself. She was just so effortlessly alluring. "Just a man," he repeated, his voice low and smooth. "But not just any man. I'm the most handsomest, charming man, and the most enticing man you'll ever meet," he joked. Wyan felt a flush of heat rising to her cheeks as his gaze lingered on her lips for a moment too long. She hadn't expected him to be so forward, but she just found herself enjoying his flirtatious banter. "Most enticing, huh?" she retorted, meeting his gaze head-on. "That's a bold claim, Lucifer. I suppose I'll have to be the judge for myself." The conversation between them continued for hours. Nothing in their exchange, just a perfect blend of witty banter and heartfelt conversations. At the end of the evening, as it began to drag on, the candlelit casting flickering shadows on the walls, Wyan couldn't help but notice the shift in the atmosphere. The playful flirtation had been replaced by a more intense, intimate vibe. Lucifer, so suave and in control, found himself more and more flustered. Every now and then, every glance seemed to entice an electric current through him, igniting a fire that he hadn't felt since Lilith. He wasn't used to being so vulnerable, so affected. I mean, he'd seen countless women talk to them, but none of them had ever made his heart race like this. As time ticked on, the lounge employees started to close up for the night. Lucifer and Wyan stepped out into the cool evening air. They stood outside for a moment, the silence between the two of them somehow comfortable yet charged with a palpable tension. Lucifer turned to face Wyan. His eyes locked with hers. The streets were quiet, and the city lights were casting a soft glow on her face. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "I suppose it's time to say goodbye." Lucifer said. "You poked his chest with your manicured finger. Doesn't have to be. You go both slightly tipsy from the drinks you took in the lounge." Lucifer's heart skipped a beat as Wyan buffed his chest, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through him. Her words, coupled with her soft, playful tone, stirred something primal within him. "Doesn't have to be, huh?" he echoed, a sly smile playing in the corner of his mouth. "And what exactly are you suggesting, sweetheart?" Wyan smirked mischievously, enjoying the way she could fluster him so easily. She took a step closer. There was a low rumble in his voice. "I'm just suggesting the night is still young," she said, her voice sultry. A stark change from earlier in that evening. "And I'm not quite ready for it to end yet. Are you?" Lucifer's breath hitched in his throat. He wasn't used to someone having this much of an effect on him, but he found himself completely captivated by her. "Not ready for it to end, huh?" he repeated, a low rumble in his voice. And what precisely do you have in mind, my dear? You're rather feisty tonight, aren't you? Ryan took a step closer, closing the distance between the two of them. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, and it made her feel a little dizzy. I have a few ideas, she whispered, her voice full with suggestion. But I think I'll keep them to myself for now. After all, the element of surprise can be quite thrilling. Lucifer's eyes darkened with desire at her words. The way she was looking at him, the way she was standing so close, the way she was driving him crazy. He wanted to pull her close and feel her body pressed against his once more. You're quite the tease, aren't you? He said, his voice was thick with arousal. Keeping your little ideas to yourself. And here I thought you were a good girl. They eventually reached Ryan's apartment, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Once inside, the door shut between the two of them, sealing them off from the outside world. Without a word, Ryan stepped closer to Lucifer, her body pressed against his. The air between them felt charged, crackling with tension. Without warning, she pushed him up against the wall, her hands gripping his collar and drawing him into a heat, passionate kiss. Lucifer was completely caught off guard by her sudden display of dominance, but he quickly regained his bearings. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flesh against him. As he returned the kiss with a fever, the taste of her lips and the feeling of her body against his sent a wave of desire coursing through him. He pushed back gently, but forcefully pinning her against the wall as he deepened the kiss. His tongue explored her mouth in a dance of desire and need. Ryan let out some voices of pleasure as Lucifer pushed her against the wall. Her heart was racing and her skin, it was on fire whenever he touched her. She ran her fingers through his hair, tugging on it lightly, as she returned the kiss with equal fever. The feel of his body against her own, the heat of his touch was making her dizzy. As the kiss continued, Lucifer's hands began to wander, exploring her curves, tracing the patterns on her skin through her clothes. He wanted to devour her, to possess every inch of her, but he was intoxicated by her, the taste, touch. The way she trembled beneath his touch, he broke a kiss, his breath hitching, as he moved his lips to her jawline, trailing a path of kisses down his neck as he nipped and licked at her skin, marking her as his own in his own primal display of desire. Maybe dates weren't so bad, Lucifer thought, as they began to make their way upstairs to Ryan's apartment.